I'd like to welcome everybody to the Expanding Consciousness Collective. It appears we don't have any technical issues to work through this morning, so let's just get started with our singing bowl. And excuse me, I have to change my layout so I can see what I'm doing here.
So let's let that sound take us within ourselves. And as we join here together, let's focus on our breath, in and out of our breathing. Feel the coolness of the air entering as we inhale, and the gentle warmth of the air as we exhale. And let's allow that breath to draw us deeper within ourselves. As the breath moves more deeply into our bodies and our consciousness moves more deeply into the center of our being. And let everything go but this present moment. And we can sit in appreciation and celebration of this present moment. What we'll find as we bring and draw ourselves into ourselves, we'll find that universal meeting place where we're all connected. Underneath layers and layers of everyday consciousness, there's the space of consciousness of universal connection. We can feel maybe deep below the surface of the earth where our energy is connecting with the other energies of people on this call today and on who listen to the recording at other times. Let's set a collective intention for love to reign, for peace to infuse this entire conversation, for clarity and wisdom. All encased in the energy of love and appreciation. And with our next breath, moving even more deeply within us, let's declare it as so. And when we're ready, let's talk.
Thank you, Sue. And for anyone, I think, sorry, I need to go back and work with the the technology here too. Or let me just ask each one of you when you're not speaking, if you would mute yourselves, and that way we'll keep the recording clean. So today we're bringing in, I think, a lot of interests of at least the people on this call. Certainly, one of Michael's interests is healing our core wounds. I know Dr. V wants to move us into positive thinking and certainly into a place of hope. Anne is very involved with work with the UN and with circle groups, which is a way of connecting and bonding. And Sue, well, you just heard Sue, so I think that speaks for itself. So, would anybody like to start in terms of, we decided to focus the conversation on some of our own personal life challenges, which I think Michael would probably call perhaps our core wounds, and then the transformations that have occurred to shift us, to heal the wounds, shift us into a consciousness of hope and learning and mutual respect. So, would anyone like to start? Anyone like to volunteer to start?
Well, I'd be happy to start.
Okay.
Since you mentioned my name and wound. Okay, so just describe a little bit my own journey. Well, let me just start with my sense is that we're all born, we're born energetically connected, and unless we had a very traumatic birth, we don't experience any sense of wounding. That there might be some pain in our life, but it's something that comes and goes, so we don't hold on to it. And then when we're about 2 years old, we start becoming disconnected energetically for various reasons, and part of holding ourselves in disconnection is that any pain that we've had, that we've suffered in our early life, then starts forming itself as a core wound. So that's the theory, that's the hypothesis anyway. And in my experience, I started working towards understanding this about 35 years ago. I started doing a Japanese martial art, Aikido, as a hobby. That was the starting point. And the discovery there was that the practice was learning how, when you're in a stressful situation, let's say you're being attacked, in this case, you're likely to be, you and your attacker are likely to be in a disconnected mode where you're sort of tensing up and getting ready to fight or flee. And the way to overcome it, the most harmonious way to deal with that, is to become connected. So I spent 35 years learning how to be connected, and I thought, well, this is a wonderful practice. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that as I was doing this, I was discovering that I had various painful issues in my life, which kept on cropping up during my life and kept on repeating themselves, kept on getting triggered. And I was asking myself, here I am getting connected, why is it that I still got the same wound? And then I was kind of really thinking, why does it take so long to get connected, to learn how to be connected? Because this is sort of a lifetime practice. And I was actually born connected. Baby can be connected. And I then discovered my dog can be connected. Here I am, an adult, and I'm totally disconnected, and it's really difficult. Then I started thinking about that, and then I discovered actually it's not that difficult. And I've now come to a point where I can teach somebody how to do that in about 20 minutes. Be as connected as what I call a Zen master. Not to say that they can stay connected like a Zen master, but they can be as connected as a Zen master. It's no big deal. We have that all naturally in us. And when we're connected, the next question was asking, now I'm connected, does that in any way, if I address myself to what my core wound is, if I can identify it and work out what it is and where I'm holding it in my body-mind area, where I've got this contracted energy which is stopping me from being totally open and flowing, can I then release that blockage, clear that blockage in a way that's easy, rather than having to spend years and years going to a psychotherapist and talking about my wounding and this and that and the other, and hoping eventually that it'll actually let go. And what I found is that the magic is that when you're connected, when you know where you are holding this disconnected energy in your energy field, I use the chakra system as a way of identifying where we're holding these blocks, and then actually release these blocks in a matter of minutes. So what I'm saying at the moment, most people will find this actually really difficult to understand. And because I've been doing this practice, this Aikido practice, which is a traditional spiritual practice, 35 years, and the underlying belief is that it's not easy and it takes a lifetime to learn. And if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. And I'm saying it's really easy to be connected. And I'm saying something else. It's really easy once you're connected to actually let go and release what's forming, what has become your core wound, and which is determining how you are in life, and all the issues that you have, and all the relationships that you have are all determined by that original core wound. So anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at, and I'd just like to say that I feel that I managed to clear all those blocks, and I've pretty well healed my own core wound, and that's kind of what I do, is teaching other people how to identify their core wound and how to release it.
Yeah, wonderful story. Thank you, Michael. Anybody else ready to speak about it?
If I could just go back on that,
Yeah.
I've got and part of the work that I do is I invite my subjects that I work with is to write up the story of their own core wound. So when I started writing up my own one, I thought, well, I could do that in about two or three paragraphs. And then I started writing it, and I found that I got to 10 pages before I knew what had happened. Okay. So for each of us, it's our core wound actually is the subject of a book, once you get into it. And we've all got that story within us, and it's a fascinating story, at least for ourselves, for each of us. And once you get into it, you'll find that it's absolutely fascinating, especially for yourself. I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you.
Well,
if we had time, I would share my core wound, but we don't. So I'll leave that for another time.
Okay.
This is Anne, and I'm willing to go next because I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about why I love Circle, and the inclusivity of Circle. And when I was 3, I was born during the war, and right as the war ended, my father was going to be for a 6-month training program as a commander in the Navy for the occupation of Japan. And my mother and my brother, who I was very close to, went off to Chicago for 6 months, and I was left with my grandmother, who actually loved me a great deal. But at 3 years old, I truly had separation, disconnection, and abandonment issues. And from that time on, I said, I will never let anybody see me cry. I was a tough little girl, so... And but what I did form was a very close relationship at 3 years old to God. And people would find me in a dark room and they'd say, who in the world are you talking to? And I would keep saying, I'm talking to God. And then when I was older and I was taken to Sunday school and they said, well, here's Jesus. And I said, well, who's Jesus? And he said, well, this is who helps you to get to God. And I said, well, I don't need Jesus. I'm already talking to God. but I did become a Christian, but also a Buddhist and very inclusive. And I think for me, when I feel abandoned or that, I have really worked on that. I'm now 75 years old, so I've had a lot of time to work on that. But going through and personal growth and group dynamics and organization development for me, when I went through my training on that, you realize that in it is in circle where you are listened to from your heart and you can speak from your heart. I could unload that burden. I could find where I was totally included, loved, and cared for. And that's why I call myself a circle evangelist without, any, that's just true. I am. And it's real easy for me to include others. So I can always think outside the box. I can create coalitions. I can create partnerships because I don't want anyone to be out of the circle or disconnected. And so by doing my work, which has become my mission, become my planetary assignment, as Jean Shinoda Bolen calls it, I get to heal myself on a daily basis and then take from what that core wound was as to being of service to others. So they too can, whatever that is, to feel that love and that support and that deep, deep connection, which is why I have a website called Circle Connections, because I agree with you, Michael, it's really about the connection. And now my work is to feel that deep, deep connection, which I did as a child, but to nature, so that I'm not separated in this whole thing as human beings have separated from nature, but in the way that I can be of service also to help other people connect to one another through love and through nature. So here I am, the Circle Evangelist, and proud of it.
Thank you, Anne. Great story. Great story. Dr. V, do you want to go? Or shall I go?
All right.
Go ahead.
By the way, everyone calls me V, so that's
Okay.
V-I-E, which actually, comme en français, comme c'est la vie en français, right? It's life in French. So V it is. You had asked us to share some of our challenges, or perhaps a challenge. And from my standpoint, just being born as a female of color in South Africa during the time of apartheid,
Yeah.
I grew into challenges. And that was, I suppose, at that time, the most bizarre situation that I suppose I could find myself in. If you can imagine, we had separate schools, separate beaches. Yeah, so the water on one side of the gate was different from the water on the other side. And I was actually, my lineage is Indian. Lineage is Indian from India. So even though I'm of Indian origin in South Africa, you are either white or non-white. And of course, we know what the British did and what the Dutch did, and all the horrific stories that happened to us in South Africa. And so there I was, branded as non-white. Everything was segregated, even transport systems, schools, universities, everything. And I had, of course, felt different each time I was out in the public, but within the home environment with my parents, my mom and my dad and my grandma, within the home environment, it seemed like everything was normal. And it was only when we went outside that we were discriminated against. And I really, from an early age, had this sense that I wanted to help people. And I wanted to maybe be a doctor. It wasn't formalized in my head, but I used to play these doctor nurses games and all of that. And my father actually had enrolled me at university when had enrolled me at school when I was very, very young. So when I started university, I was actually 16. So my father registered me for taking up courses to be a doctor. So I'm in pre-medical university, age of 16, at a non-white university, and Nelson Mandela is in prison. And within the first month and a half, our students decided to gather one day in front of the rector's office outside in the courtyard, sit there peacefully, and start singing for the release of Mandela and for the freedom of the country. And we were just sitting there peacefully singing, Nkosi sikelele Afrika. And we were just singing that, and suddenly we heard this strange sound coming from behind us, and turned around, and there were these army tanks and soldiers with guns and dogs, and suddenly they were upon us, and we were just running, helter-skelter, screaming, running, shouting, just running. And a student in front of me was running, fell down an embankment, and I ran down to try to help her, but it was too late. She was already injured. And at that time, I heard a sound again, and I looked up, and there was a soldier already running towards us, dog by its side, gun out in one hand, and it was too late, so I put my body over the student, and it was still too late because he started to then beat her with a baton on her legs, and the dog started to bite at her, and then suddenly he lifted his baton to strike me, and I just looked up into his eyes. And it seemed for that moment that nothing else mattered. You know, I was not afraid. I wasn't worried. I wasn't concerned. It was as if I bonded with him. He was looking into my eyes, or staring into his eyes. And I don't know how long we were there, but it must have been just a brief moment. But something happened at that moment. And then suddenly he shook his head. He lowered his baton, put his gun away, called to the dog, and they left us. And we were saved. And of course, amid tear gas and gunshots, I helped the students to the nearby physics lab. And the university was shut down. We were thrown out of pre-medical school. And so there went my entire hopes for being a doctor. And I registered for another degree. Anyway, long story cut short. I received a scholarship after a while, a working scholarship to study in the US. And that's how I left South Africa as a youth. And, you know, I thought at that time, gosh, leaving South Africa, the world's going to be different. The world's going to be peaceful. You know, there's no discrimination. Everyone's going to be happy. And, you know, I ended up in the south of the US. And, you know, my university days were the best days of my life because there was freedom, but still I realized that people were not at peace within themselves. And to cut a long story short, I've been living on my own for 30 years now, literally on my own in many countries. And what I realized is that people are still not at peace. Even if they're living in a country that is free, there's something going on within the human that is tugging at us. And for me, what I found, especially being in many, many challenging situations on my own in foreign countries, what I found is the sense of peace within myself, because I was being myself. You know, it's each time I was trying to be something else, either trying to compete with co-workers or trying to do things that I knew I didn't want to do, but the companies wanted me to do, or the other researchers or scientists wanted me to do. I was feeling uneasy, but anytime I just broke out of it and I said, I don't care what others say. I don't care that I'm not going to be earning money. I just want to do what's right. And I felt so peaceful within myself because I was just being me. And that's my message here. You know, even though I've been through so many challenges, and right now I'm actually going through a challenge. I was in a climbing accident just at the end of summer. No health insurance, and now they've discovered that there is still something lodged within my system, so I need to go into surgery in a few days. I just learned about this yesterday. But it's the sense, you know, we need to be our real selves. And that is the most important thing for anyone who's listening out there. You know, it's not about the stories we read in books or, step-by-step approaches. You know, nothing works. It's just us. It's so easy. It's just being yourself, you know, without competing with anyone around you. That's the marvel of life. So I'll stop there.
Wonderful story, V. Thank you so much. Sue, you want to go?
We're now unmuted.
I'm not sure that I have a story. I'm just so involved right now in listening to everybody's stories. There are such strong people here and people who have overcome amazing things and lived through amazing things. I think I would just say that from my perspective, our stories are very, very, very important in our own particular journey and perhaps in showing ways of thinking or ways of relating to the world that might be helpful to other people. And I just, for me, I guess where I'm working is in recognizing that our stories can also limit us. And we're really reaching right now from a, conscious evolution or expanding consciousness or evolutionary perspective. We're reaching for something we've never known before. And so I guess for me, I feel like I want to make sure that I'm not clinging to or holding on to a story that limits my ability to see what might be emerging, because it's a really exciting time, and especially right now, we're really moving from a sense of, me and my personal story into a more consciousness of we-ness, of collective consciousness. And so I think that's where my stories have led me, is just like, how can I see this differently? How can I perceive my story differently? As valuable as it's been, I love stories. And I love hearing people's stories. And that's just what I would add at this moment right now.
Okay. Thanks. Oh my gosh. So I guess I'm up on stage at the moment. I have so many transformational stories, and personally, I've had a lot of huge overcomings. Speaking in abstract terms, certainly terror and rage have been two things that I have had to struggle with and find ways of releasing and or overcoming. But if I go back to the concept of a core wound, for me, I think it came from being born in a female body in a male-dominated world. As a teenager, I can remember feeling split and torn in half. Do I spend my time painting my nails, fixing my hair, putting on makeup, and dumbing myself down so that some guy would ask me out for a date and hopefully eventually marry me? Oh, God forbid that I should end up being an old maid. In my mother's eyes, that would have been a fate worse than hell. Or would I do what I really wanted to do, what was fun for me, which was learning, growing, actually climbing trees, being in plays, singing in choirs, doing lots of to me, they were the fun things. They were the connecting things. And yet there seemed to be this cultural, for me, it felt like a prison of having to get somebody who, God forbid, would marry an ugly duckling.
Oh,
It's interesting to me. Yeah, I spent a lot of time really dumbing myself down so that somebody would ask me out. Because I was smart in school, and I think I was threatening to guys, particularly guys that were out there just looking for a quick sex fix. I just wasn't their woman. Um, and a lot of my challenges throughout life have been in relation to abusive, bullying men. Because as soon as I choose to be who I am and step out of that very limiting cultural box, I have been subjected to slander and mostly verbal abuse, not physical abuse so much, but a lot of slander and verbal abuse. It is as if I've been on the receiving end of, get back in your place. You don't belong out here thinking for yourself. You belong being available to us for sex when we want it. So, sorry. So, I at this point I have moved beyond that, but that having to deal with those kinds of challenges has moved me into a position of my own strength and power. So don't mess with me at this point. Um, and I will say I do at this point have some very beautiful friendships with a lot of very strong men who don't feel threatened by me and actually appreciate what I have to bring to the table. That's just one of many stories I have. But let me see, we're at 1:37 according to my computer. Um,
But Janet, I do think your story is why, as Sue said, we need a new story that is not based on the patriarchy. And we know that it hurts men as well as it hurts women. And that is destroying also the environment. So, I think the more that we have spoken out as women, the Me Too, no more, don't mess with my sister. And that goes with racism too. That which has really cut us off from one another or ranked as one better than the other is the work of healing the core. And so I thank you for, being brave enough to speak about this. I was a tough kid. I was a tomboy. Nobody messed with me. So, and that's why I'm a feminist, because I'm not going to have any of my sisters or anybody be messed with. And I think that's our job. And, as expanding the consciousness, and it's out of love. So, I believe with you. I mean, I have to be in that presence of love to speak to those oppressors, to connect with them, because it isn't a we they, it's an us.
yeah, and it that's the space I am in right now too. Because I need
For now,
to,
I'm muted.
I need to,
I need to.
are you getting an echo? I
Are you
am.
getting an echo? I am.
Yeah,
Would everybody else mute for a minute, maybe?
I won't be able to come back on.
Well, you can in a minute.
Sorry.
Okay, right now I'm not getting an echo. how do we, my life has been full of dealing with oppressors.
Mm,
And a lot of that is, it seems to me, because of my desire to love them and include them. But it also has made me vulnerable. And there are, I have had to learn to, with some people, to set limits, to set boundaries. And if I don't receive respect from them, to move out of the relationship in order to protect my own energy field. That's certainly been part of my life work and my healing of my own core wounds, to use Michael's terminology. I'm just, and that is still my challenge. I think for me, it has always, the way I have dealt with it generally is to withdraw my support from an oppressor and simply not give the oppressor any energy
right.
and move off in a direction that I find to be supportive rather than one that is slapping me down or imprisoning me mentally or emotionally or physically in some way.
And Janet, I think that comes from a state of, as I keep saying, inner peace. When we feel that peace within ourselves, first, it's very important. If each human feels that inner peace within themselves, that's the only time they're going to actually be involved in this expanding consciousness that we talk about, positively. It's until each of us feels that. And because many of us, are still not feeling that peace within ourselves, we emit these negative vibrations, which then affects others, and as you were speaking, I was thinking of Mahatma Gandhi, the way he actually got rid of the British in India was not by calling on the people, the millions of people, to rise up in arms against the invaders, against the oppressors who have been there for hundreds of years. He instead donned on his loincloth. He was walking the grounds of India and bringing the people to understand, and through peace, they got rid of the British. Through peace, they freed India. So it's this inner peace that is so important, even though it was that one individual who brought it about. And the reason why India is still now in carnage is because each individual is not feeling at peace. So I just wanted to bring that message up. It's so important that each of us feels at peace, and that journey is our personal journey. That story we were sharing, it's not a story. It's our personal journey. It's our life that we're sharing. So what is our personal journey? And are we getting closer to just being peaceful as we are? I think that's so important. Even if we don't have friends around us, like you said, Janet, get rid of these people in your social circles who are usurping your energy. That's okay. Even if you stand alone, feel peaceful when you stand alone.
It's very interesting to me. Could somebody mute, please?
I would like to say something, but every time I unmute, you get an echo.
Or let me mute and see if.
Is that better?
Yeah, you're not there. There's no echo on you, Sue.
Okay, thank you. This is such an interesting conversation because I hear these idea of peace, and for me, what that's beautiful space to aspire to, because when we are confronted with any kind of contrast or challenge, which might feel like oppression sometimes, our physiology goes into a fight or a flight. So fight might be kind of an echo of that energy that Anne was expressing of nobody's going to mess with me, nobody's going to mess with my friends, nobody's going to mess with my sisters. And flight might be something like, I'm going to put up boundaries and I'm going to go away from the people who upset me. And all of that is great. But I think we're actually reaching more for that sense of inner peace or inner power, maybe a sense that, I mean, there are people, I know some people who walk around the world and people don't mess with them. And it's not that they're aggressive or that they challenge people or that they set up boundaries. They're just exuding an energy, like Dr. V is saying about the just exuding an energy that comes from this well of peace, that people just don't mess with them. Emma Curtis Hopkins is a teacher of religious science of mind. And one of the things that the stories that she tells is that there was a guru and a bunch of followers, and the followers would walk around after the guru and ask challenging questions, kind of like Bart Simpson, and they would try to challenge the guru's teaching. And one of the students one day said, "Teacher, you teach nonviolence, but if you were standing in the middle of the road and a hungry tiger was walking towards you, would you sacrifice your own life in order to live up to your ideal of nonviolence, or would you kill the tiger to save yourself?" That's a reasonable question from a certain perspective and a certain level of consciousness. But the teacher, being at that, what Ken Wilber describes, I think, as the teal consciousness, just looked at the student and said, well, if I were a master, that would never have that situation.
Right.
That would never come to me as a situation, right?
Right.
So we all participate in our own oppression. And the inner peace that I hear V talking about, to me, is that sense of just not participating in that inner oppression anymore. And then people won't be draining our energy or oppressing us or having opinions. Anyway, that's my thought about that process. I think the inner work is super important to find that sense of knowing who we are, so that we portray an energy that doesn't get messed with. End of
Right.
story. And that's where we're moving from
Yeah.
a we consciousness. So I'm going to mute myself now so that the
So who would like to speak?
Yeah, can I reply to
Sure,
that?
please do.
Okay, so I think I'd just like to say that my understanding, the point that I've understood is you can be in inner peace, but you still haven't healed your wound. Okay, so this is something I've discovered all the time. I work with lots of spiritual people, and they're absolutely fantastic, and they've been doing it for years and years and years, and they know how to get to that point of spiritual peace. And just like me, having done 35 years of Aikido, I'm still sitting there with my core wound. So until you actually put the two together and have the inner peace and clear the wound, heal the blocks and heal the wound, you're still going to be vulnerable to being triggered or being upset or attracting things into your life. Okay, so that's a really important lesson. Second thing, I just want to take up Sue on this thing about where we're moving towards in the bigger picture. Okay, so what we're hearing now is that we've all experienced some pain in our lives, and we've all got this sense we're all carrying this core wound. And the discovery I've had is that's kind of natural to human beings. We're born without the wound, or we're born with a collective wound, which might be the Adam and Eve wound. Okay, so if you remember the Adam and Eve story, they were booted out of the Garden of Eden, and the first thing they did was they covered up their shame. They clothed themselves, their sexual shame. So, right at the basis of our core wound is our sexual shame. We don't go out on the street with no clothes on. Okay? We've all got some embarrassment there, or whatever it is. Okay, and then we might be born with that, and then we picked up our own wounds along the way. and they're very sacred to us, and they kind of keep us disconnected and part of that, the rest of humanity, where most of us are, which is fine. And we've managed okay like that for a long time. I'd say probably tens of thousands of years, human beings have been more or less disconnected. And as long as we've been able to have language, and we've differentiated ourselves from animals with that symbolic language, we have been in a process of continuous disconnection. Okay? So now what we're doing is we're talking about our individual core wound, but we've got something which is probably bigger than that, which is our collective core wound. And the question is, we're now out of our wounded state, we've now created some problems for ourselves, which are actually happening, moving so quickly that if we don't actually get ourselves together and deal with them very quickly, it might be too late. And in 10, 50, 100 years' time, whatever it is, we might not be here to talk about it anymore. Okay, and what I'm talking about is climate change. Okay? And most of us, we all know about climate change, but most of us don't actually know just how serious the threat is. Because we've got literally as little as about 15 years, if that, within which to do everything necessary to stop ourselves from going beyond 1.5 to 2 degrees in temperature rise before it gets to the danger where the whole thing becomes irreversible, and then it's too late to stop it. Then we've got a situation where we're going to go from in a downward spiral. It's going to be very, very difficult to get out of it.
Mm. And doesn't that, Michael, doesn't that come into play with inner peace? Because who is contributing to pollution, to all these negative effects on the environment? It's us humans. So because we are so disconnected, we feel that we're separate from nature. We don't realize that we are nature. So we're disconnected, and that comes from, and when I use the term inner peace, I really mean connected to everything. So because we as humans, we're the only species running this mark on the entire planet, so until we humans begin to realize that we are nature, we're not separate from it. It's not a separate entity. It's not climate change. It is actually us humans and all beings threatened by what humans are doing. So when we humans decide we don't want to harm any being, and it comes mainly from the jobs we are doing and the things we have around us in our environment. Are we willing to give up the motor car? Are we willing to give up the fridge? Are we willing to give up these devices that actually create these harmful energies that are destroying part of ourselves, which is nature? So it all comes back to, firstly, finding our inner peace, the real self that we are, which is actually nature. That's the disconnect. And until we do that, we can keep talking about climate change and everything else. People are going to attack it because they don't realize we're really talking about ourselves because we're talking about nature, So that's the way I see it.
Well, yeah, I agree with you entirely on that. So that's really the issue. Until we actually reconnect with nature, we're not going to be able to deal with any of these problems.
Right.
And the problem that we're facing is that these problems are moving so quickly that if we don't somehow find a way of doing that, not just you and me, but collectively, it's going to be absolutely too late. So it doesn't maybe affect us to such a great degree, but it affects our children and it affects our grandchildren. Okay, and this is what we're up against at the moment. So this core wound that we're talking about is really what our individual and our collective core wound is what's stopping us from finding that inner peace and that inner connection and with each other, with nature, with the rest of the rest of humanity. And so the real question is how do we do it? How do we actually find a way of doing it for ourselves so that we can actually how easy it is to clear that and heal that core wound, and then help other people to do the same thing. In time, because we don't have very much time. We have hardly any time at all.
I think when it's not seen so much as a negative, as a problem, but as an incredible solution for us as human beings to heal ourselves, because we know that being in nature and to being connected deeply to nature is healing in itself. And so when we look at it by saying, this is what we want for everyone, this is what I want for myself, this is where the inner peace, this is where the health comes from, because when I'm healthy, then then all the things that I do by being and staying healthy is healthy for the planet and is healthy for other people. So when we switch it around as a negative, but definitely couch it in that we've already gone over the tipping point of all of this, that we have to change the way we think, the way we live. But make it fun. Make it like this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to us as human beings.
I agree.
I agree with that as
And
well.
we're asking about how can we do it?
Let me just
One, I can tell you for sure, and I have given talks in many, many groups. And one of the areas where I find the greatest of inspiration for helping nature and our planet is within the children. When I inspire children, the solutions they come up with for saving all beings, not just humans. Humans are by the way, but they talk about the other creatures, not hurting the other creatures. So the hope for saving our planet is actually within the children. So it is the children. If we, just us here, us 5 of us, we find our inner peace, we really, really, really are at inner peace, and then we begin to share that, especially with youngsters. Wherever we go, whether we're sitting on a bus, we're on a train, we're walking down the street, just engaging youngsters in this. That's what we can do. Just spread it amongst ourselves. And as little, packets, we just start changing things. We can't maybe do the entire planet, but at least we're contributing during our lifetime. And I really, really know the hope here is with the youth. And this is where we need to start, even if it's just the 5 of us, find our inner peace, really be ourselves and share that. That's the only way to build up this collective consciousness to be one with nature.
And I notice we're really getting close on time. It's 1:58. That's almost a wonderful close in itself. But may I take a little time just to reflect back?
Please do.
To also close. Core wound, separation and disconnect. How do we connect? Aikido, open and flowing. Release and clear blockage in minutes. Chakras, easy to connect. Let go and release. Relationships, our relationships are determined by our core wound. Abandonment, talking to God, personal growth, organizational development. Listen to from the heart. Circle evangelist. Inclusivity. Think outside the box. Coalitions, mission, planetary mission. Love, support, deep connectivity to nature. Of service and proud of it. Life. Female of color designated as color in South Africa during apartheid. Separate beaches, Indian lineage, white or not white, horror stories branded as non-white, everything segregated. Within home, everything was normal, but discrimination went outside the home. Sitting peacefully and singing. Army tanks, soldiers, guns, shouting, running. Soldier beating student. Looking into the soldier's eyes with no fear. Bonding. Something happened. Put the gun away and left. Sense of peace within, just being oneself, not what others wanted me to be or do. I don't care what others think. We need to be our real selves without competing. Stories are important. They show ways of thinking and relating. We're reaching for something that we've never known before. What might be emerging? Moving from me to we. How can I see my story differently? A new story. Me too, no more racism. Ranking one as better than another. Expanding consciousness out of love. Speaking to oppressors and connecting with them. Inner peace is so important. Mahatma Gandhi, walking the grounds of India. What is our personal journey? Fight or flight? Inner peace, inner power, exuding energy. If I were a master, that would never happen. Inner work is super important. The collective wound, the Adam and Eve wound, sexual shame, language, continuous disconnection, and language does disconnect and separate and divide. The individual core wound, the collective core wound, climate change. We are nature. Inner peace. We're connecting with everything. Are we willing to give up our cars, our fridges? What is this real self that we are? What if we see all this not as a problem, but as a solution? If we start looking at things differently, what do I want for myself? What do I want for everyone? Inspiring children, sharing inner peace, being ourselves, and sharing with others. And I want to thank all of you for just a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And darn, I forgot to look up the next date we're going to do this, but I believe we agreed it would be the first Saturday of each month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll get that up on the schedule as soon as we can do that. We invite you all to join us in person, or if you can't join us in person, to listen to the recording afterwards. We would love to have you come in and actually join the conversation with us. So thank you, everybody.